Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Martin and Cezi Glendenning, who are missionaries currently serving in Croatia with a broader scope of responsibilities that includes 12 different countries. Martin grew up here in Iowa. Cezi grew up in Albania, and they met in Germany. And so we're going to hear a little bit about their story, how God is using them, but also how we can connect and support them. So let's get into the conversation today. Martin and Cezi, I would say thank you for taking time to be on our podcast today to share a little bit about your story and how God is using you. So thank you for being here. And as we begin, could you share a little bit about what life was growing up for both of you? And I know that can be a little bit of a kind of complicated question, so just share however you feel led with that.
I'll start because I have maybe the more common story that people might relate to a little more. So I grew up in the U.S., in Iowa, actually, so just down the road from where you're at. So I grew up mostly in Sheraton, Iowa, a small town, and my dad's been a longtime pastor in Iowa. We took a few years off to go to Texas, where he pastored there for a while, then back to Iowa. So I have Midwest in my veins. And so I grew up, in a Christian home, and was pretty much had my own kind of journey with Christ and all that, but was always surrounded by Christian influence into my life, and never veered super far away from that. And so I went to Mid-America Nazarene University, and while I was there, I did kind of decide early on that I was never going to be in ministry. Like, that wasn't the life for me. There's no money in it. There's no fame, I knew the work that went into it, and there just wasn't enough recognition either. Like, it was just I saw a lot of the sacrifice that went into that, and thought I could make more money if I gave that much effort into something. And it was at Mid-America where, God kind of got a hold of my heart and said, just kind of showed me those things I was pursuing wasn't really going to fulfill me. And it was actually through a song of a secular songwriter who was just talking about how he had everything. He had the money, he had the girls, he had the fame, and it didn't satisfy him. And I was like, if this guy who has it all is still not satisfied in life, maybe I need to rethink some of my priorities. And so I really started reading scripture. I was taking an Old Testament class at the time, and some of the verses of the suffering servant just kind of stood out to me as I realized the path of Jesus was opposite of what the path of the world is, and yet that's where real meaning comes from, and real purpose and fulfilling in life comes from. So from then on, it became a path towards, all right, God, where do you want me to be, and where do you want me to serve? And so I had an opportunity growing up, or in college, had the opportunity to go on some mission trips. My roommate was a missionary kid from Ecuador, so I visited him over a Christmas break one year, and then had the opportunity to go on some mission trips. And through all of that, just really felt like God calling me into international missions. And so was down that path, and then went into this crisis, of, okay, do I need to change my major to religion, or what does that look like? And at the same time, I did some internship summers at Camp Table Rock, where I think probably some of your youth have been. And so I was in the second year when Rick had just started the camp. I was there, and so I helped to kind of build it and put things in order that I know he's built it up a lot more since then. But one of the things was, he was just having to begin to work with his accountant and setting up the books and the payroll and all that stuff. And he got this email from his accountant where he was like, I don't know what this means. So it was like a different language to him. And I had just taken an accounting class and in my business, major, and looked at it and said, oh, you just need to do this, this, and that. And he goes, okay, you're doing the books from now on. So I did that the next few summers, and realized that God really needed administrative finance people in the church. And so there's kind of that call to missions and that experience saying, okay, God, isn't necessarily calling me to a pulpit ministry, but is calling me to serve. And so that kind of melded into that. And a few years later, it's a longer story, but yeah, I had the opportunity to go and serve in Eurasia in Busingen, Germany, as the finance coordinator. And so yeah, I just really began to prepare myself to be as useful as I could be, and so that God could use me wherever He had for me. I thought at that time I'd be going to South America because that had been my experience before. I was learning Spanish, and then it was like, hey, do you want to come to Germany? And so really felt like God had opened that door. And I arrived 2 weeks after my wife did, and so that's where we met. So I'll let her catch you up on her side of what was going on during those years.
Yeah. So my upbringing is a little bit different. I'm from Albania originally, so I was born in Albania and grew up in Albania, and I was born during communism. Albania has one of the harshest communism in the Eastern Bloc, and my dad was a politician, and he was caught in a very young age conspiring against the government to overthrow communism, and ended up in prison for 12 years. And after that, he married my mom, and then we were born in what is called an internment for families like ours. Practically, the government sends you in remote areas of the country to do hard works. And so me and my sisters were born there. And so this was, but I don't have bad memories. My parents were so good to shelter us. And even like for school, every time we would come home at the end of the week, my dad will review a little bit what we have learned in school to readjust, the ideas that we were learning. But I had a curiosity about God from a very young age. So I loved, Grandma would talk sometimes about God to scare us more than anything. But it was against the law to talk about God, but my grandma was too old. Nobody was going to put her in prison for that. And so I just fantasize about who God is, and I would write letters to Him and put them in the balcony, just this drawing. And when communism fell, my mom comes from Greek Orthodox, my dad Muslim, and so we grew up kind of a little bit knowing a little bit of both. But I decided to follow my dad's religion because the area of Albania was Muslim, and so just embraced. I thought was my opportunity to know God, and I kind of was learning about the Quran and praying 5 times a day. And at a certain point, I even covered myself because I thought, I just wanted to be closer to God. And my parents disagreed with the notion of it completely, but they let me go with it. And then they chose me to go to Saudi Arabia for 5 years so I could go and learn more about Islam, and then come to Albania and teach women about it. And so that was like a great honor for our family. But just a few months before the process would start, my dad had a car accident and he passed away. And so that kind of threw me into an identity crisis, full about God and the idea that He's a loving God and He's a just God. I just thought with the death of my dad, none of that made sense. And so decided to leave Islam and just be on my own. I never rejected God. I just thought He was not good enough, to really spend the rest of my life serving Him. And so we moved to another city closer to my mom's family. And I met 2 girls in my class. They were both Christian. And they had just converted like a year before. But I was trained to tell Christians what's wrong with them, and so I just would engage on debates just for the sake of the debate, not because I really believed what that was, or I didn't believe anymore in the ideas that I was debating for. And so but they just loved on me all the time. They were just so kind. We're best friends even today with both of them. So, and so they invited me to go to church, and I went to church, and I went with the intention to get in more debates with Christians and their ideas of God. And I actually had an incredible time with the youth group there. And I came back and I told my mom, hey, I want to go to church again. And she's like, no, you're Muslim, like you shouldn't go to church. And the Protestant church was not at all known in Albania. You either were Catholic, Orthodox, or Muslim, or there's another religion in Albania. And my mom said, no, you're not going to go. They thought everything was Jehovah Witnesses in our parents' brain. And so I said, okay, I don't have to go. Then a missionary came to our school to teach English. And so we became really good friends. And one day he asked me, hey, me and my two friends, if we would help him to start a church in the city. And I said, yeah, sorry, like I really don't do church stuff. And he's like, okay, can you help me with brochures? And I was like, sure, I can help you with that. That doesn't make me a Christian, So I took these brochures and I put them all around. And one evening I was at home. We didn't have electricity. Albania was going through a very rough political time. We had like 1 hour of electricity a day, if any at all, or water. And so I was at home. My mom was talking to the neighbors, and she had put candles around the house. And since my dad had passed away, I really had not dealt with his death. Like I was completely numb. I didn't go to his funeral. I really didn't cry. But that night it really hit me so hard. Like it just came like a wave, and it just felt so desperate for me. Like everything that has happened to my families, from my dad passing away, for moving, we're living in a farm now, we live in the city, new school, all these dynamics. And I just felt so desperate. And somehow I took this brochure I've given to everybody but not read. And at the end of it, there was just this little story of Jesus. And there was a prayer at the end that says, if you would like God to be your father, then just ask him to be part of your life. And so I just remember going on my knees and I said, God, I really don't know what this means. I've never been a Christian, but can we start over? And that was it for me. Then from then on, just have had a little bit of detours into that journey, but that has been all for me. And yeah, that's how I came to Christ. And I tell people it's fascinating to me because here I was planting a church before I even was a Christian. So don't ever limit God or put God in a box with what he does with people. So yeah.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for sharing. And Martin, you shared a little bit about your calling and then how you guys met in Germany. Cezi, could you share how God called you to ministry?
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't as obvious, like Martin grew up with the idea of a call and, but I think for me was everything in Christianity, just in religion in general, was completely new. So the idea to be a missionary was not even part of, to me, only Western people could be missionaries, like there was not, but as I look back at my life, I kind of was a missionary, but you just are who you are because just God gifts you. You really don't know what the labels are. You just, like I tell people, it's like fish don't question why they swim. They just swim because that's who they are. And I think that's how when I look back at my life, that's how I feel the vocation. Then, and I just served in planting that church in my city, served teaching and Sunday school and preaching and God forgive us what we taught because, sometimes we would just read the Bible for the first time and then teach it to children. And so we really, yeah. And so, but it just came natural for me to serve in the church. It's only when I moved to Italy and I joined the Church of the Nazarene. I was not in the Church of the Nazarene in Albania. And that this idea of God calling us became stronger. I knew it a little bit before because after I finished high school, I was really good student and I was interested in so many areas. So I said I was praying to God to use a profession, to follow a profession that would help him. Like Martin, I just I just felt that if I needed to serve God, it needed to be something more than just studying theology. I had just been, Albania had been hosting a lot of refugees from Kosovo and Serbia were in war together. So I had been serving with the refugee center and then going to Kosovo after. And it just, I just felt like they just didn't need just theologian after a war. They needed engineers. And so I decided to study engineering, and that's why I moved to Italy to study engineering and joined the Church of the Nazarene. And I kept serving in the foster homes and that, just in so many capacities in the social environment mostly. And but the final call for me, and I thought I could do both, like I could be a really good lay person and have my job, which, I had an apartment in the center of Florence. I had a really good salary. I just was living my best life at this point. And but I went to do a mission trip in South Africa. The Church of the Nazarene organizes, I think, every few years this third wave, which was young leaders all over the world come together. And so I went to South Africa, and I was doing a service one day, and I went to this community that was really poor, which was fine. I grew up part of my life poor. Albania is one of the poorest country in the Balkans. So poverty didn't really, wasn't that touched me so deeply in terms of, people are poor people. But it's just, for me at that moment, the world became so big that I felt like nothing that I did would make a difference. And I said, God, what's the point? Even if I sold everything, even what's the point? It doesn't, it's not changing anything. And so I remember that evening I went to the service, and Dr. J.K. Warwick was preaching that night. I didn't even want to go. But then he preached this beautiful sermon where he talked about the little boy who gave Jesus his bread and fish, his loaves of bread and fish. And, that, he said, will not make a huge difference if that's all what you own. But if you give it to Jesus, it will become more than enough to change, 5,000 people and more. And there will be leftovers. And so I remember that night just going at the altar, and I said, Jesus, I do not have 5 loaves of bread or 2 fishes. I have some crumbs and maybe a little bit of fish, and I just bring it to you, and whatever you think this would serve you, it's yours. And so I thought, I had a big ego. So I thought I would be the next Mother Teresa of the world. So she's Albanian, so I felt like there was some connection there. No. But it took about 2 years before the Lord really opened the doors for me to get into ministry. And he had to kind of destroy that ego that I have created. My problem was that I really had not failed many times in my life. Everything I did, it just worked always well. So failure was not part of my life. But there was this point where Italy was having some immigration laws changed, and I fell through the cracks of that immigration. That meant I lost my job. I couldn't finish the habilitation as an engineer. I lost my house. I lost all of it within 2 weeks.
Also her boyfriend, which I was okay with. That's the part of the story I'm okay with.
So and all of it gone, and I just got so mad at God, and I was like, this wasn't how it was supposed to be, Clearly you don't know what to do with my fish and bread, so you got to give it back now, I just experienced this total silence from God, and it was one night as I was depressed. I was at the lowest I've ever been in my life, and one night it hit me, and I just realized I've been like that little kid who, parents keep giving gifts and then you start demanding for them instead of being grateful. And so I just realized I've been that kid, and I said, God, I'm so sorry. Like everything good that I've had has been a gift of yours. It's not something I originated because I'm so smart and I'm so good and so successful. It was just a gift of yours. And I'm so grateful that you gave me so many good years. And if I have to spend the rest of my life like this, serving you from this place of depression, and I still choose you. And so for the first time that night, I've had few mystical moments in my life, and this was one where I fell asleep after so many nights of just not being able to sleep well. I just fell in deep sleep, and I had this dream or vision. I have no clue what it was, but I just remember going to God's feet, and I brought him this broken vase that I have in my hands, and I just only could see his feet, and it was all broken. And I said, God, this is all I got, and I if you can make any use of it, here it is, And I thought he would, glue it together, and he would make out something out of it. But he just handed me in a few seconds, just handed me this beautiful new vase. And he said, I've melted you into something new. Now go and serve me. And so I just woke up and everything was gone, like all the bad emotions, the anxiety, the panic attacks, the depression, it was just all gone. Like, it was beyond my explanation. I'm a rational person. That's why I studied engineering. So, these moments are very unique to me. But, and since then, I am the person who never really waits for God to, I'm not the person who's going to sit on the couch and wait for the will of God to happen, So I believe that there are moments in our life that the will of God is a very straight road. You have to take that one, and that is always clear. So if you're wondering what the will of God is, if it is a road, you will know it so well that you would want to say no to it. That's what the Bible tells us when God called somebody specifically. But most of the time I tell people, like, the will of God is a garden. Find something to do, look around, and there's more than one good choice. It's just, there's so much mess. Pick one that aligns with your passion. And that's how I felt at that moment. I said, okay, God, I have a plan, but this time, instead of doing things for you, I want to do things with you. And so here's my plan. I really want to prepare for ministry, but there are some points here that you have to help me. First, you have to provide, because at that point I was with no money. I've spent all my savings and everything. So, or either find a good job or a scholarship or whatever I need to do. Second, I don't want my mom to have a heart attack when I tell her that I'm leaving engineering for theology. And third, I want my church I want my church to confirm that this is my journey. They know me, they love me, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing something that I'm not called to do. And who better than a healthy church? And I was part of a healthy church to confirm that for me. And then I had some other points, but seriously, like within 3 days, today, this is event, I called my pastor and I said, hey, Daniel, can we talk? I feel God is telling me something and I want to talk to you about it. And he said, yeah, sure, come tomorrow. And that same day, I got a phone call from European Nazarene College, with whom I've been taking some classes online, just for personal, not online in extension, just for personal knowledge, not because I was going to ministry. And the coordinator that was in Italy called me and she said, hey, European Nazarene College is offering a full year scholarship if you want to go there and study. And I just sobbing, then I went to my pastor and I said, Daniel, this happened. And he's like, Cezi, we confirm you. We have always known this is your path. So we got you. So we will journey with you in this. And that just became another confirmation. And then I received a phone call from my mom, and I'm trying, I'm just talking more or less about anything. And my mom said, Cezi, I think there's something going on with you and you're not talking to me. And I said, oh, Mom, don't worry about it. It's like, no. Like, tell me. And I said, and I just told her everything that has happened. And my mom said, you know what? For all your life, since you started this journey with God, I've tried to stop you, and fight you back on this. But maybe this is the time that you choose this path. And so, and just like to me, that was the final confirmation. And so from then on, I just sold everything I had in Italy, just packed my life in a one suitcase and went to Albania to apply for visas and then to Germany. And that's where I met Martin. And so we met together in Germany. We were good friends at the beginning. And towards the graduation, we realized that we liked each other too much to be apart from each other. And the rest is history. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a powerful story of obedience, but also God using difficult circumstances to get us to where He wants us to be. And so you've been serving as missionaries. And can you share where are you currently serving, and what does that really mean? Like what are you doing? I guess.
Start.
Yeah. So we just kind of bridge. We were in Germany. We had our first son in Germany, and then we moved to Hungary. I was working at the regional office, and then so we moved to Hungary, where I was still doing finances, but at a field level. And Cezi had been mostly kind of maternity leave during that time, and so had taken a break kind of from working, and was actually going through some German integration stuff. And then we moved to Hungary, and she started getting back into the more ministry as a profession, not just kind of as a mother. And then from there, we helped with the field administration in Hungary, and then we felt called to Croatia. And so about 3 years after that move, we came to Croatia. And that's a story of itself, but I just really felt God called us here. At the time when we moved, there was still a pretty big influx of refugees coming through Europe that was the result of the conflicts in the Middle East, mostly from Syria, and then that's what started the wave of refugees in 2015. They started coming to Europe. 2011 is when the war started. And then with that wave of Syrians coming, then there was kind of Iraqis joined, and Iranians and others, and kept kind of moving further and further east. And so now we had a ministry here of Arabs, of Persians, some Afghani were here. And so we just started the work with refugees there, and that just kind of opened the door to us being a church ministering to Croatians, yes, but also with the focus within CM Help on refugees. And so then when the war in Ukraine started, we began to just kind of look for opportunities. Is God going to open any doors for us to work in that with that community? And then sure enough, God kind of, we weren't looking for it because we had enough that we were doing, but when God opened the door, we said, okay, we have to walk through this now. And so that's kind of continued the refugee work that we were doing. And at the same time, the local church here in Zagreb, we have one church in Croatia, began to grow. As far as our roles, when we left Hungary, we didn't just get to drop our field responsibilities. They just kind of said, here, take on the work in Croatia and continue doing what you're doing, because we liked what you were doing there too. So that's what we've been doing. And so I kept doing finances for the field, and then the administration of our charity work here in Croatia is kind of my role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we moved here, I took Croatia as a pioneer area. So it's not a district that, this is pioneers before it becomes a district, phase 1 district. And so I lead the work of the Church of the Nazarene. I took that role to lead that here in Croatia. Just a few weeks ago, almost a week ago, though I accepted the role as the field strategy coordinator for Central Europe. So now, instead of being responsible only for Croatia, I'll be responsible for 12 countries that are on Central Europe and overseeing that work. And I teach also for European Nazarene College, and I pastor our local church here in Zagreb. So, but I'm hoping these roles that are in Croatia to pass them on to a new family that will join us next summer. But for now, I'll be keeping both roles till somebody else comes and picks up the rest here. So, yeah.
But that I appreciate you sharing just briefly, because sometimes we just use the term missionary so broadly that it encompasses so many different opportunities, so many different roles and responsibilities. I appreciate you sharing just a little bit about it, and I'm sure that the ministry in Croatia has extremely unique challenges with ministering to refugees. And from logistical, from language to financial to sustainability, and so I just appreciate you sharing a little bit about that, and part of what I'm grateful for our conversation today is asking a question of how can people like me, people who are in the States or in Iowa, be supportive of people serving in your type of capacity, because I think there's a desire for people to support the missionaries, but it's hard to find tangible ways to do that. So do you have any suggestions for that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's of course the obvious. We talk about prayer support is a huge need, and then to know that that's happening. And so I think now with technology, it's easier than ever, just to write a short note. It says, hey, just want you to know we're praying for you today. Not asking for, we want a big, long update of, whatever. Just that quick note that says, thinking of you, praying for you today. Or specifically, hey, we prayed for your kids today. We prayed for your church today. We prayed for, as you get to know us, you'll begin to know some of the names of the people we work with. And we can then pass that on to them and say, hey, this church in Iowa, they prayed for you specifically today. We just wanted you to know that. And that's such an encouragement. One of the things we love about when we go on home assignment and speak at different churches, called deputation, kind of the older term, is just being able to say, just to see the churches that around the world that are supporting missions and through that supporting us, but then also coming back to this church and saying, hey, we were in, last summer, we were in West Virginia last summer, and there were these churches we visited, and they're supporting what we're doing here. They're praying for you. We told them, some of the ministry that we do, some of your stories, and they wanted you to know that we're praying for you. And so those things are just really meaningful.
Yeah. So, I think just staying connected with us, because the truth is, the church the Nazarene Church has been so faithful to mission work. We're able to do what we do because we have churches like your church who support mission with faithfulness. And sometimes, they're just, they spend their resources, give their resources to the church, not always knowing exactly where it goes, but which shows so much trust that people have. And so we're very thankful that, that to come from a church that does that. But we encourage people sometimes to come and visit too, do a trip to Croatia or go and visit some missionaries. It doesn't have to be a huge work and witness team, although we do welcome those, but it could be as simple as, okay, they talked about refugee work. I don't understand this really well. I want to go and check out. We have actually had in the past even people that oppose the refugee work, or they had strong feelings, suspicious about it. And we invited them to come and serve. It was like, why don't you come and see, and come and see for yourself. And and it changed their hearts and their minds into, especially towards the Middle Eastern refugee service that we were doing. So I think we just tell people, just stay connected with what we do. And that is the biggest support. So also for people to know that they're a part of something bigger, that their faithfulness goes really far to the other side of the world. And so I would say those are some of the ways that we really appreciate. And just sending us a note for our birthday or Christmas, those we really appreciate those too. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's that's a question I like to ask missionaries of how can we better support you, and just ready for that, because I'm just hoping that this conversation can help our local church and others potentially just connect with you. And so I've got one final question. Are there what are some struggles that missionaries face that people might not think of? And particularly, you both came from very different cultures. I don't know if that would play into it, but you also have some young children that there are different things that you have to consider. So what are some obstacles or even struggles that you may encounter as missionaries that people might not think of?
Yeah, of course. Like we at the beginning of our marriage, the cultural piece did have, we understood marriage in a different way and based on our culture. So it required a lot of communications for both sides in that. And just in general, you need a good communication in marriage, but it required just more intentionality from our parts. But I think we're in a good place now in that sense. So we don't have a lot of other cultural things coming up.
We're kind of a culture of our own now.
Yes, we're typical, the third culture family, definitely. And but yeah, so the struggle I think for us here is the personal part is that we both come from incredible families, and having to raise our kids from that daily influence of the grandparents. Martin comes from, I don't know, since the 17th century, generations of Christians, and my family doesn't go that far. My mom, she's a believer, but I have an incredible family when it comes to social engagements and, trying to change the world in their own way. So I do kind of grieve a little bit not having that daily influence in the kid's life. And, but we also see God that provides a lot of that. We make a family in every country that we go. So this is my 5th country to live in. And so I have now a family in all the countries that we have lived. In terms of ministry, at this moment, I'm holding practically 2 full-time jobs. So trying, from now till summer, and that takes a good time from both of us. So trying to balance all of those, because the work is big and the workers are few, and that's a reality in the mission field. So we do work with refugees, and that comes with incredible, I tell people, like, we do get a seat in the front row to the incredible work of God in among refugees. But it's not always this romantic, yes, we come and say that story when we come on home assignment, but that story took years of work and prayer and dedication, and really a call of God to us to never give up on anybody, because he doesn't do it either. And so to participate on that, no matter how high things go and how low they go, to stick with people because God loves them. And so to see people working with refugees come, they come with a lot of trauma, and that is beyond our understanding. Now we have the conflict between Gaza and Israel. We have a member in our church from Gaza, and who came to Christ just a year ago, and her family's there. We had a guy last week who's connected with our church who lost all his family, wife, children in that war already. So it's in trying as people of God, as pastors, as leaders, to always not not lose God's perspective into these conflicts. Then we have Russia and Ukraine on the other hand too, and we serve to both of those people. And so, try never to choose nation, but always to choose people. And that's not always a easy place to be. And to always see people through the image of God, and to invite people in our church who have good reason to hate one side or the other, to invite them into that space, to never lose the humanity of the other person just because they hold a different passport. And so that at this moment, that is our biggest challenge, but we also see great steps. Having that space really is changing people's mindset too. So holding that space. And I think that's what the kingdom of God is, like holding that alternative place where we are all created in the image of God, independently where we come from. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that, and your thoughts essentially provide somebody like me with perspective of the struggles that I might encounter here in the United States are significantly different. And not that my struggles aren't real, but keeping that perspective of just, you're talking about people who have experienced deep trauma and are displaced, and then you have just conflict because of what passport they hold, and that's a little different than just the political party differences that we find in the United States. So thank you for sharing. And I misspoke. I said the previous question was my final question. I'd like to end with another one. Is there anything else you would like to share today? Just in case there's something that we missed.
Well, I would just reiterate again, how thankful we are to be part of this global church. That it's pretty small when you look at the other denominations of the world, but we're a family that really cares about each other. And today, kind of thinking you might ask some of these questions, we asked our son tonight as we were eating. We said, hey, if you were asked, what was something that's different or that you struggle with, or that's a challenge of living here, what would you say? He's 9. He's like, he just looked with this. Well, both of our kids were there. They just kind of looked at us like, we don't know how to answer that because and Cezi reminded me, they've never lived in the U.S., so they don't even know if there's anything different. But I think, for our kids, being able to grow up feeling, they're normal and, that their needs are taken care of. And that's because we have a church that's really, we've never gone without as far as our essential needs. And if we've ever needed anything, the church has been there for us. And so we're grateful for that, not just for us, but for our kids who are also having to, we signed on for this. They kind of were born into it. And so, but the church really loves kids, and especially missionary kids. And we're very grateful for that.
Yeah. And honestly, again, to kind of underline more what Martin was saying, thank you to churches like yours that support mission with so much faithfulness. And so that allows us to do what we do without having to think of too much of other things, because there's already, as you see, there's already so much work to do. And but a faithful church with prayer and finances and time has really, I hope they see that we are an extension of that faithfulness too. Mm-hmm. And we become this channel of flowing God's grace and healing into a broken world, not only in America, but here in the rest, on the other side of the world. And it takes that faithfulness, because I became a Christian through mission work, and so it changed my life, and now I commit myself to change other people's life. And I hope we continue this generation after generation, and even when things become hard. And so during COVID, our church was so faithful in its giving, in its prayer, in its time. So just thank you. Like, this is from the deepest of our heart. We're very grateful for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time today. This was a rich conversation, and I just appreciate you investing in us here in Iowa and just taking the time to share. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.